a UBC student and I've just finished my bachelor's in international relations with a minor in French. And in 2008 and 2009, I had the opportunity to do an exchange in Lyon and Paris. So it was a bit of a hybrid exchange, but the first semester I did French language courses in Lyon and at the Université de Lyon, and then in the second semester I did international relations courses at Sciences Po Paris. And Campus France facilitated this entire thing and made the process a lot easier. The most important thing I learned, maybe not even thing that I learned about, what I learned about the French culture in general was that it's not quite what other people stereotype it to be. It's a very complex country, and I think it's full of a lot of contradictions, especially with the old and the modern mixing in a way that's very different from other countries around the world. And that was a very big revelation for me, just because you'd always think that cultural differences are going to be a big barrier, but there's really a connection that goes beyond that as well. The most obvious benefit about going on the exchange was, of course, the language development. I felt as if I was able to speak French a lot better than I did coming into it. And it's not just in a formal level as well. One thing that I realized that my courses never covered here in Canada is how to speak normally, you know, to young people with slang and in an informal fashion. I think a real test of knowing a language is whether your sense of humor is able to transfer over. So for me to be able to, you know, finally transfer a joke, maybe not a very funny joke, but what I was thinking in English over to French was a big step. But on a larger scale, what I learned about in France was actually about myself. I think when people are placed in a foreign environment, they really get to see what they're capable of. And actually, we're capable of a lot more than we think we are. And the challenges I face in France really showed me that I'm very adaptable. I think most of the learning that I did there probably came from outside of the classroom. So the interactions I had with other French people and other international friends as well. And I found that's what gave me the most insight into another culture, was by interacting with the people and seeing what, you know, something as simple as sitting down with all my friends from different places, and we would go on YouTube and look up all these different videos that, you know, were funny in our country, and we would share that, and you learn so much that way just by having these, you know, conversations about pop culture, about politics, and about what someone my age would be going through in another country. I was already motivated by a love for the French language going into it, but there's a fair amount of strategy that went into my choice of going to France as well. So being the second national language of Canada, I definitely think that, you know, professional prospects are going to be more promising in general, along with you know, when you travel, French is very widely spoken in other places other than France as well, so that opens up new countries for me. Well, there definitely is a huge difference between the two education systems, and I'd say that accounted for some of the culture shock that I went through. So for example, I found the French system to be much more formal, a lot more hierarchy incorporated as well. So in classes, I spoke a lot less than I would in Canada. It was more absorbing what the lecturer would say, and it was all very, very formal in a big conference type style. Whereas I find in Canada, it's a lot more informal, and there's a lot more interaction between the professor and the students, and discussion is a very valued thing as well. There's always a discussion period that supplements the lecture so that you can synthesize ideas. But it just comes, I think, from their different values of how knowledge should be evaluated. I would have to say one of my favorite parts of France is the food and the gastronomy and how that's really part of the culture there. So one thing that I really enjoyed was Sunday morning markets, and how that became, it's so much a part of the culture that you would be buying produce from farmers in France, and that's just something that's normal. They really value the quality of their ingredients, and one thing that I really envy, for example, is how that's in place, and how there are laws against genetically modified food, and everything in a supermarket is marked with their origins and whether it's organic, and it's very, you know where your food comes from and whether it's good or not and what's in season. And I think that's something that we don't have in the mainstream here in Canada. So I definitely enjoyed the food, and I ate a lot when I was in France.